All right. Well, we are recording live here for the Mortgage Podcast. So we started this, Bob, a couple months ago, based on really your thought leadership and your prompting to organize a podcast around really both the CMB program, the Certified Mortgage Banking Certification, which you are the chair of, and the chief evangelist. If there was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there'd be Bob, who would be the fifth gospel of the CMB. And then of course, just to talk about all things in a definitive and with some degree of authority around the priorities of the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association, an organization that obviously you're intimately involved with, and of course in your work with Wiener Brodsky and Kiter, in helping steer the industry through all kinds of legal, legislative, and regulatory considerations to make housing more affordable for consumers, as well as the mortgage process a profitable one and a less burdensome one for mortgage lenders to be successful. So
yeah, certainly trying to keep the regulatory process less burdensome. But let me clear up one thing. I'm the immediate past chair of the Certified Mortgage Society. I termed out in October of last year. Currently, it's Deb Jones of Citizens that is
That's
our
right.
chair.
That's right. She just rose to that position here just within the last 60 days, right?
No, that was October at MBA annual. That's
right.
We have two official meetings, and I'll get into a little bit of more of that. The things I kind of want to outline for the CMB Society. So this year, as the immediate past chair, I am the chair of the nominating committee, and that process is probably one of the more confusing things, because you nominate people to go on the ballot who want to be on the nominating committee. So it's like nominate to vote to what? And the ultimate purpose of the nominating committee is that sixth person, there's five people with a vote and one alternate. And that alternate is obviously there in case one of the people have to recuse themselves in discussions of a candidate, or if they just, something happens and they aren't available to participate anymore. That we select who the next secretary would be that would move into the leadership position, because it's not just the 3 years in leadership. It's a 6-year commitment. Starting the first of my 3 years on the nominating committee, Val Baresh, who is also on there as the past chair before me, and Len Patton before that. So we just actually, our vote for that went live. We have messages. The CMB Society communicates in 2 places officially, in the CMB community, which is at connect.mba.org. And if you're an MBA member, you've never been there, that's where all your committee, your profile, what you say about yourself, your bio, how people can get in touch with you through the MBA, because members can look up other members and get that information. So that would be one of the ways. The other one is in our CMB Connect LinkedIn group. We've already had a good turnout. We originally had 8 people on the ballot. A couple people said that they didn't want to serve, that they actually wanted to be considered for the CMB secretary position. So that's great. But that was the first thing I want to talk about, just to highlight the fact to get the vote out. I know we sent it out yesterday. I think we've already had about 140 some votes. So
yeah, I voted yesterday. So I was one of those.
About a third of the active CMBs have voted, and I'd like to get it up to be somewhere about 50%. I know we've been, right at 50% when we've done major votes before, and I'd like it to be that case. I'd like to see the participate and everybody speak up.
And how many CMBs are there? And I know this is a hard, because how long has the CMB certification been in place? What was the very first year?
I think it's 53 years. Actually, we can do the history of that one time. We get Deb on. Deb Jones has wanted to do, establish a historian position, because we do have it. Mike Rosser, I believe, was the first winner of the Mike Rosser Award. But the first year, I know it was 50 years when Val, right when Len was turning to Val. So I think we're at 52, 53 years now. In the system, I believe it's around 1,100 people that are there. Now, of course, not all the ones at the beginning were tracked. Active CMBs were right about just under 600. And of course, we have active, emeritus, and inactive, because part of the thing I did when they brought me in was the recertification process, so people would stay active and engaged and involved with MBA. So either attending MBA, the CMB quarterly meetings, or an MBA conference or something, some way participating, not just getting the pin and going away. And then, offering to help with grading, sponsorship, being in your state or your local MBA, something that you're doing in that process to stay engaged in our industry and be one of the leaders. You don't get the CMB pin because you're a leader. Because you're a leader, you earned the CMB pin, and we just want people to do it. And it's not a resume thing. Granted, it helps I know it's helped my career greatly, and the opportunities I've had moving as a non-attorney with Wiener Brodsky Kiter and getting to focus on, the mortgage industry and how we help families buy homes, and that builds communities, and those communities are where families want to, live, work, and pray and vote. And I always point that out to regulators. So it's just one of those things. It's been, and yes, I am the CMB evangelist, as Mitch Kiter has dubbed me. I think very well, not just the fact that I have a CMB tattoo on my chest, which I honestly do, and I show it off quite often because people still don't believe it's true.
No, look, it's fascinating. And, look, it was your leadership and Brian View and Matt Van Fossen and Taylor Stork's, leadership. I mean,
Yep.
It was
Bob Brooksmith.
Often
CMBs.
I knew very little about the CMB program, but I knew people who were CMBs, and that drew me into the program. Meg Bennett was my
Yep.
sponsor. And to see, especially Meg, to see someone who, was, reasonably young professional, maybe been in the business, maybe 10 years, very ambitious, very smart, very, hungry to have an impact. And I thought to myself, here I am, somebody at, 23 to 24 years in the business. And in talking with her, quite frankly, was very energizing to say to myself, like, I've been in this business a long time. How come I haven't pursued this myself? Just to formalize my commitment to the industry and my connection to the MBA and to other serious thought leaders in the business. So
it is a challenge. And you mentioned about not knowing that much. I think our biggest challenge is you don't really get to learn about what the society truly is until after you earn the pin. You have no real understanding of who the past chairs are, what the Mike Rosser Award, which was won by Bob Brooksmith this year. And we awarded it to Dave Stevens posthumously the year before. Truly great leaders, CMBs who rose to the national forefront, did stuff, contributed so much for the MBA or for the society. You really don't have the look back to understand what it's done, how CMBs have contributed in so many different ways till you get in the society and you actually get inside the CMB community and you can look at that. And that's a challenge. And it's some of the stuff that I know Deb in her priorities now. How can we help the new CMBs get welcomed in, understand what the resources are, how to network, how to find the right committee, how to just, mentor more people who to be CMBs. You mentioned when you found out, I first learned about it, I think about 2010 or 2011, when Griff Straw came to an Ohio Mortgage Bankers Association meeting. And I was, working my way onto the board for Ohio MBA. And it was like, yeah, this would be great. And people kept saying, you should do it. You should do it. You should do it. And it took me till 2016. Now, granted, I did 4-year stint there as a state mortgage regulator, but it's not an easy process. The CMB is not for everybody. It is a lot of studying, and it's like going back to college and cramming for exams. And you got to know it with a 6-hour written exam, and you got to know it with a an hour-long discussion panel to be able to talk through the issues too. Yeah,
I think the way I would word that, just having done it just most recently here last summer, is it's for anyone who's committed to the industry and who's committed to the process, right? I don't think you have to be the smartest person. I don't think you have to be, the most experienced person, in the business. I just think you have to be committed to the work, the coursework, the classwork, and the preparation. And to be honest with you, I didn't go into it understanding the amount of work that was involved with it. To be honest with you, it wasn't until I had made such a public announcement around me committing to get my CMB that when I felt the amount of work that was required, I thought to myself, I need to really buckle down. I need to really commit myself to this process, because it's a it is a heavy lift, but it's worth every second of it. And it took me about maybe 4 months or so from May, the coursework in May through, and then I did my written in the end of July. And then I of the 5 segments, 2 of which I did not pass. And so I just had to buckle down again and pass the 2 sections that I didn't pass. And then I did my verbal in September, or maybe early September. And then I got my PIN at the New England Mortgage Bankers Conference in Newport, Rhode Island.
From me.
That's right. From you.
We were
That's
both
right.
there, and I knew you were going to be there. And that's one of the things that once you pass the oral exam, you are a CMB. You can put it in your name, you can put it in your title, change your business cards, all of that. So I always tell people, well, why do we make them wait till October? If you pass it, and we've had CMBs take the oral panel so far this year, give it to somebody as soon as they can, because you earned it. Wear it with pride. And that's a great opportunity. And it's funny you mentioned, I failed one of the 6 sections too. And I didn't, and quite honestly, when I heard the graders' feedback, I had not completed it all. I thought I knew more than I did, and I skimmed through it, and I just went too fast. But you say, it's not.
Which section was it? Which section?
I think it was 4, residential loan administration.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah.
So,
I failed. I want to say it was the hedging. I think, which was section 3. And then I think servicing and loan modification on 4, or maybe that's section 2. But yeah, no, I had to double back down in my 200 pages of study notes.
100%. I mean, 2016 when I was doing it, again, I took the May prep class. I took my written exam the last Friday in August. I remember because it was a football game. Actually, that's high school football. That's college football. It was a Friday, and I had a football game that night. It was the first varsity game. And I remember my brain was so fried. I'm not sure if I called a good game or, was throwing out, MSRs, wrong thing, wrong acronyms in the middle of a football game. But I retook it and passed. And then I flew back when we were doing it then. I flew to DC. Flew in and flew back in the same day, took the CMB question. Was very, difficult, fried my brain. They let me sit there for 15, 20 minutes, waiting to find out if I earned my PIN. And then they called me back in, all with very straight faces. And then finally said, here's your PIN.
Now, what year was it when you no longer had to fly to DC to do the in-person?
That really changed when the pandemic hit, when 2020, under, going Madeline Johnson, Seth Sprague. It was kind of the realization when they were CMB society chairs that we need to loosen up a little bit. We need to do something because we aren't doing as many conferences. We aren't doing, this. How can we do this? How can we do, and that was just an accommodation. And by the way, we've learned, as we know from this, what we're doing now, there's many other ways we can communicate. I am very happy we've gotten rid of conference call lines where we're all blindly on there and you hear somebody making notes or talking over to, whatever, and you can't just mute them. I love being in,
a Zoom
computer controlled, web meetings.
Yeah, no, I found the prep orals to be incredibly valuable because the first prep oral that I did, I kind of sailed right through it. And then the second prep oral, I got just hammered. People were asking me questions I did not know the answers to. And all of a sudden I got nervous. I thought, shoot, I may not pass this oral. And then the third one, of course, the real oral that I did in September, it went really well. I couldn't have been, better or more satisfied, obviously with the outcome, but also the process. Yeah,
it is always a challenge because there are so many times when the candidate knows the response, they just can't pull it out in in consistent sentences, and it just tells you they haven't practiced enough. You just got to get loose with it. I mean, everybody's going to get nervous. I was sweating like whatever. I was nervous as hell. We always are. And I still get that way when I do presentations. A little bit of nerves helps you stay on the right path, staying prepared. But I'm obviously very happy I've earned it and I've had the opportunity to be chair.
Look, I'm super happy that I earned it. Going into it without a heck of a lot of, appreciation, I think, for what the CMB was, but going through the process and then really having earned the pin and being a part of the community of CMBs is, I think, where the deepest appreciation comes from, or arrives, or is sort of driven from, because it. Just the level of conversation. I do believe that, like you and I've talked, I think, of course, CMBs don't know it all. CMBs aren't perfect. But I do think that if any individual outside of the mortgage arena, whether you're a legislator or a reporter or a news anchor, or you're doing some kind of, and you want an understanding of what's happening in mortgage and housing and real estate, to me, the CMB is like the most reliable individual, because you've been through a formal process to speak to specific points and to be an advocate for the industry. Yep. And you're a serious voice for mortgage, housing, and real estate and the consumer, right? So I just think that to me, the CMB is in my head, as I'm formulating, I think, the strength of what it is to be a CMB, I just think it needs to be a more people need to understand and assume that place of authority in just common society, when people want to understand what's happening in the mortgage industry or in the housing markets or in real estate, and what kind of advice, or how do we interpret the war in Iran, and what that kind of impact that will have on bond yields, right, and how that will impact mortgage rates. I just think people should have a CMB, speaking to what's happening.
I mean, certainly it validates a lot of things, but again, people don't respect you because you have a CMB. People, it's what you've always done in your life that's risen to the level where you now we're at a CMB. I mean, the pin doesn't mean, the tattoo doesn't mean, the certificate on the wall doesn't mean that, hey, now you've got to pay me more, respect me more, do whatever. It's who we are and the ideals that we live towards. That's what does it for us. I mean, we attest now, every year that we meet the ethics standards, that we're engaged with the MB, that we're still doing things, that we contribute. We do this because we care, not because we earned a CMB. I hold our industry to high accountability for their actions. I talk to state regulators, legislators all the time. I hold them to just the highest standard. I speak at every NMLS ombudsman. I'm always questioning why we aren't doing things better on the NMLS system, because I was an ombudsman for 2 years. I understand what it's like. I was a state regulator for 4 years. I know it's not easy. I know they've got budget constraints. I know they got a lot of licensees. Their job is to do it right to the best of their abilities. Our job is to do it the best, same way. And the challenge is states do it differently. Mortgage companies do it differently. Banks, credit unions, QSOs, not nonprofits. Everybody does it differently, and it's not easy. It doesn't mean you get off and just said, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Or, when somebody cuts corners on compliance, or, if they cause consumer harm, or if it's the state not getting out, their annual form in the right time, and then they give you 3 days to try to get it in, and they want to penalize you afterwards because they screwed up their process. I hold everybody that standard. We represent, what we do is home ownership. That's families, that's communities. That's the standard I hold it to.
What's interesting, Bob, is that people will talk about the strength of the National Association of Realtors, and it's a legacy association and a legacy lobbying power within in DC. Yep. Because of its duration, because of its length of time of being a political and an economic force in the United States economy and in DC. People underestimate the length of time, or I think don't appreciate the amount of time or how long the Mortgage Bankers Association has been around, and how formal the institutions are with respect to the MBA, and how formally connected the MBA is to legislative and regulatory institutions across all 50 states and territories as well as in DC. And while NAR is a very powerful organization, they've done a lot of good work advocating for, real estate agents and in the home buying process. The flip side is the MBA, and through its, the state committee and its
State
committees.
regulatory committee.
Yeah, being able to be a very consistent, dependable force in advocating for consumers and advocating for the mortgage industry at large. I don't think the MBA gets enough credit for that.
No, and it's a lot of it is behind the scenes. And we can kind of pivot into, I know what next topic was just some MBA things, and especially National Advocacy Conference. So the unique thing about the National Advocacy Conference is it's Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday.
Yeah.
But Monday and Monday morning is the state and local workshop. So state and local associations, trade associations that work with MBA, are in there trying to see what they can learn, what they can do. And then they also go at NAC and lead state delegations going to the Hill to meet with the representatives and the senators from their states. And that's where that comes from. William Cooper, Liz Facemeyer, that group with the SLRC, of which I'm vice chair of that, Matthew Van Fossen, who's been on this before, he's the chair this year. We're the group that does that, puts it together in cooperation with a lot of other people behind it. I mean, MBA's got a lot of support resources. There's a lot of firms and a lot of companies that step up. An example for what we did nationwide, we're at 31 states right now with 32 in process this year, South Carolina, hopefully. State remote work legislation.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, states said, you got to be in a licensed location, do licensable mortgage activity if you're a licensed lender. So that means you can talk about rates, you can negotiate terms, you can take an application in one spot, your office. How often do you think that actually happened?
Yeah.
How often do you think that they followed up and they did calls? And I was actually working on this with Hayden Richards at Bradley when I was working for that firm for 5 years. We were working in the digital world, the realization that loan officers are mobile. They take calls. And I used to use true example. My daughter, now the mother of my oldest grandson, the one that's in that picture.
That's great.
She was a junior high softball pitcher. And I'm at a game and I get a phone call from a client. I was originating mortgages at that time. And I see it, I pick it up, and I walk down to the foul pole and I'm talking to them about it. Their builder had just told them they didn't get the certificate of occupancy. The loan was going to be able to close next week. They needed more time. And they're like, you got to talk to your lender. You got to see what they can do. And, it's a Friday afternoon. They're freaking out. They're doing whatever. Had I not been able to take that call and tell them what we could do for their term and how we could extend it and everything out, have that discussion, that's licensable activity. Said, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you about this. I have to wait till I get back in the office on Monday morning. How do you think their weekend would have gone? How do you think they would have handled it? How would you like to go through that? And that's inconceivable.
Yeah.
To use a Princess Bride term, that's the way the industry expected it to go. So when the pandemic hit and we all had to go remote, stop the spread and all that stuff, everybody got told to go home that week in March.
Oh yeah. St. Patrick's Day.
In fact,
we're coming up on the anniversary here pretty soon.
Yep. About a week. Yeah. So we, as part of the ARMOR Industry Advisory Council, that's the American Association of Residential Mortgage Regulators, that for those that don't follow all the anagrams, that group, we were talking to them about we needed better direction, more consistency. What can we do? And they actually said, hey, if you guys had some kind of model language or something we could do, you need to come with that. So we got together with MBA, Pete Mills, William Cooper, Kobe Bryant at the time, Kobe Pruitt at the time, sorry. And then said, hey, we want to do this. And they're like, take existing language, make this work, make it short, make it skinny. We want a skinny statute. We don't want something that's going to be too onerous. But we also knew that, there's state senators and representatives are going to see this and they're say, wait, we're going to let them go to, Starbucks and take loan applications or something. We had to put some stuff in there, and it's all standards that apply. And it basically says that, GLBA still applies, Graham Leach Bliley, Act, FTC trade rules. You got to be secure. You got to have, all of those things. And it's a 2-page statute. And we put that together and trained the state associations. Here's what you got to do to have this. We offered, I've testified at a couple, but you know what? Montana doesn't want somebody that lives in Florida that works for a DC law firm showing up in Missoula saying, you need to do this. No, They want somebody local. Tennessee, the Tennessee MBA right away jumped on board, took it, got it introduced. They did it as part of their legislative day. They actually heard the committee hearing that day. They spoke about it on the House floor that afternoon, and the House recognized the members of the Tennessee Mortgage Bankers Association in there. That's what makes that change. So MBA's at the core, supporting this, giving us that opportunity to all engage and help each other out. And then we take it state to state to state. And now, we're almost, most states, I think we're down to about a handful now that are still left out, but it was Hayden Richards, myself at Bradley. We coordinated a group of 24 MBA companies walking through, what's in that list and what we can live with and what's on there. And got it approved by MBA, got it endorsed by the SLRC, took it at our Armor. They backed it and said, yes, this is the kind of stuff we did. And it was all from language from the Washington state, which was one of the first state remote work ones that came out as an emergency action, the non-depository supervisory committee that's part of CSBS, Armor ones. We just pulled all that language from there and coordinated it, put it together. And that was a monumental effort that unfortunately still continues today because we got a handful left. But that's a good example of all you're talking about, how MBA is at the core, hub and spoke and make it work all the way around.
I mean, it's incredibly intricate. And I think that you articulated that really, really well. And it brought us back to a really incredible time where we didn't even know how deeds were going to get filed in the county courthouses, right? And in that whole process, and the MBA took a very visible, the inter-association coordination between ALTA, between the MBA, the National Association of Realtors, all trying to come together to say, like, here it is, St. Patrick's Day 2020, things are starting to slow down or change, or people are being sent home, from work, and we were trying to figure out, like, how do you show houses? How do you do signings and wet sign states? And it was an incredible time. But if there's ever a time where you need really tight, disciplined leadership within the associations across housing and real estate, it's obviously times of crises. But it's also, outside of those times where, there could be economic disruptions, there could be, recessions, there could be, like we talked about earlier, wars that, that come up. And there's a lot of questions that might arise from, that might impact policy or just actual practice.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's great to stay involved. And I know, we talked a little about state and local. We talked a little bit about the National Advocacy Conference. If you've never been, it's the greatest time to be a mortgage citizen.
So I've actually never attended one. I'm going to be attending one. This is going to be my first National Advocacy Conference on that Tuesday, Wednesday, April 15th, 14, 15, I think it is. What are we meeting with legislators, congressmen, like senators?
Well,
like how does that work?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Having been to, I think, a dozen over my years, from way back when till now, it's great because, number one, MBA teaches you, and two, you're not alone. So they'll sit you. So when you show up, basically lunchtime, you're going to get there. They'll have a little, stuff for us. They'll have kickoff, and you sit by your state. So you got to find where your state is. You get to meet all the people there from there. Florida will probably have 3 tables. I know, like, Texas is another one that'll have 3-4 tables. But you sit with your state, other members of your state, and you listen. And we listen to MBA folks, and spread throughout the day, because legislators have committee meetings, time on the floor, other things going on. They will come in, but like French Hill will be one of the people coming in to speak to us. And if you've never got the opportunity to hear French or speak with them, I'm members of MBA, obviously. I'm also a member, and I contribute financially to NA National Association of Mortgage Brokers and their PAC. And
Yeah.
because of my donations to that PAC, I was invited to speak with French Hill in a conference call with 15 other people that were available at that time. And they actually asked me to ask him a question. We talked about it. Very realistic towards housing. He's the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. So a person that we want to know, person that we want to be available, but have him be there. They'll have other people that walked in. Last year, Elizabeth Warren came in the afternoon and spoke to us all, people from both sides. And they all talk about how MBA is recognized on the Hill. And, the David Stevens term as MBA and the Bob Brooksmith term at MBA, how things were, this challenging time, COVID and the pandemic versus the great financial recession. MBA has risen in standards so much because we got our crap together and we've made it happen. But they recognize that. That's a great time. So they'll go through all of that day, Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Then we'll have a reception. It's at the, I got to look this up, the newly renovated Air and Space Museum. And as Matthew Van Fossen hinted at our last one, some folks will be dressed up in colonial attire. And he's got me as one of those folks. So that'll be a cocktail reception there. And we'll have staffers and other folks coming in, talking to us and meeting there. Hopefully a lot of the people from FHA, Ginnie Mae, Fannie, Freddie as well. There always are. That'll come in and you get an opportunity just to meet them and, have a personal discussion. Then you come back the next morning and basically you're set up with your appointments. Your state will divide into teams and you'll go by regions. You'll have a state leader, somebody, and you'll kind of decide, hey, here's our 4 priorities. We want to talk about the 2 bills that are out there, the housing bill that's in the Senate, the housing bill that's in the House. They're moving stuff along. There's some differences between the two, and they're going to have to do reconciliation. Hopefully we'll know more about that by the time we get there next month. And they'll break all of that stuff down for us, and we'll divide up the topics. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but there's one thing that really makes you more important than any other lobbyist walking in there. You're a constituent. You're in their district. You're in their state. You vote. That matters. That matters a lot to them, and they will sit there and listen to you and talk. Sometimes you get a senior staffer, but that's the person who, George Rogers, one of the senior lobbyists for MBA. I met him first when he was Jim, Boeheim's. Oh my God. The former House Speaker of the House.
Basketball's on your mind.
That's 100%. Anyway, when he was the senior staffer, met him and we talked through things way back when. So yes.
Is there an opportunity? I mean, is it mainly a way to, as both constituents and members of the association, to engage with the legislators? But are we going to talk about real policy? I mean, because there's a lot of priorities that the MBA has with respect to housing affordability, the secondary mortgage market and the GSE reform, the housing supply legislation. There's there's amendments to the VA home loan program and opposing various funding fee increases that the MBA has called on Congress to implement kind of a permanent partial claim program to assist, veterans at risk of foreclosure. So it's like, are there ways that we'll talk policy, or is it mainly a way of just being present?
It's present, but it's also what we have an opportunity to influence on our day. So like the trigger leads bill just became effective, right? So that's part of something that we talked about at NAC for 3 years. What trigger leads were. In fact, when the Florida contingent, when you go to a state senator, it's everybody from your state goes in at once. So we're in the big conference room in Rick Scott's office, and we're there sitting down and we're talking about what trigger leads were, and somebody's defining what it is. It was Yvette Claremont from Sarasota. She's talking about it was, and Rick Scott's chief of staff goes, wait a second. Is that when my husband and I were applying for a loan? We got 72 phone calls that first day about trying to take our mortgage someplace. It was like, boom, you make that hit home right away. But I mean, that trigger leads bill was something that we took time, and it is policy and it was over time, but it's the bills that are in place that those people have now. The true policy decisions about where we're trying to move the CFPB and all those kind of things, that's the MBA stuff that we do, and the stuff that we do as part of the Mortgage Action Alliance. So both are very important, very possible that we make a difference because we show up. And when Ma has a call to action, our emails really make a difference, because if we get 10,000 on an issue, it gets clicks, a bump someplace. But if we get 88,000, 100,000 emails written on an issue, it state representatives, state senators are like, hey, I got to pay attention to this. What's this mean again? And Gus Bilirakis, who's my representative here, and you can tell we're not scripted, obviously. Gus Bilirakis, who's my representative, he recognizes me from being there 3 or 4 times and him making me look like Shaq, because he's about 5 foot tall. Great guy. Don't agree with him on everything, but he definitely, reaches out. And when they have an opportunity, hey, we're going to have this meeting, Bob, I'd love to have you come in and talk about housing. Those are the things that make a difference. It's not I won today, the game's over today. It's not that. It's a long-term relationship thing. And I love that the MBA's taken that position and grown it little by little by little. And that's why we're the adult in the room now. And I say that as a member of MBA, not that I'm the person in that room, but, trigger leads, remote work, those are clear benefits of things that combined, we got together as, advocates, as members of the MBA, members of state MBAs, and made a difference.
Look, I think it's incredible the amount of activity and the amount of the number of opportunities there are for people to get involved and actually have their voices heard in leadership outside the walls of their own organization, and actually in an industry that really needs it. The next, are you going to the midwinter housing conference that the MBA has?
I am not. Colorado? Are you going?
I'm not. My son is getting married next week, actually.
Congratulations.
And so, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to be I'm not for the first time in probably 15 years. I'm not going to the Ellie Mae ICE conference. But because it's next week and I have to be in Tucson, Arizona. So it was just a little too close for the conference, or for.
I have the National Private Lenders Association conference down in Miami starting Sunday night through Tuesday this coming week. Actually, they have a conference that's on St. Patrick's Day. I'll have to work in some socks or something. And then the following week, I'll be in Atlantic City with Matthew Van Fossen. Are you attending too?
Yep. No, Matt has me speaking along with the CEO and founder of AnnieMac on kind of the state of the industry and some more mortgage market trends and, M&A and different things affecting boots on the ground. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. That's always one of the, do you remember Sam Morelli? I think we may have talked about
Sam lives down this way. I know Sam.
He's such a good, are you in Florida? Do you live in Florida?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Okay. Tampa.
Yeah, no, he's down in Fort.
This is the home backdrop. The last couple of times you've seen me, I've been in North Carolina because we had the shower for our daughter, and then had, our youngest daughter, Abby, we had a shower for her in January, and then February we were doing, we did 3 weeks up there in anticipation of baby Lorelei's birth. And then the first 2 weeks with her, and we just had to drag ourselves away on Sunday and come back to Tampa.
Well, Sam is always, as I've known him since the early 2000s. And he, actually, when he was an executive at Sunset Mortgage back in 2004, and he, but he's the one who introduced me. It used to be the Tri-State. It used to be the Mid-Atlantic Conference between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I think maybe, was it Maryland? But there was it could have been New York, but there was, I think, 3 states. And now it's just sort of focused, I think, on the New Jersey MBA. But he was always such an advocate for just being involved in making sure that advocacy was at the centerpiece of operating leadership. If you're going to run a mortgage company, then you really need to be part of advocacy at the MBA or at the national scale, because what happens on the outside ends up impacting you on how you run an organization on the inside.
100%.
But no, look, I'm looking forward to the National Advocacy Conference there in DC. I think that'll be the one. I do that conference, and then the Texas MBA, and then the Housing Wire Gathering Conference, immediately thereafter. So we're in full swing.
Yeah, I'll be in. I'm actually doing a Potomac Current event the Thursday after NAC before I had come back south. And then I will be at the Texas Mortgage Bankers, be my first one. We've been members for years. Usually have a WBK speaker, but I don't think we have one this year. I'm just going down to support Jody Cochran and the CMBs. They've started a state society as well down there. So support that group and try to host a breakfast or a happy hour or something for them.
Hey, that'd be great. Count me in on that as well. And I look forward to taking another CMB photo and just raising more awareness around what the CMB is and how people can best support the industry in the most meaningful of ways on the advocacy level. So, well, this is great. Well, I appreciate this episode of the Mortgage Forecast or the Mortgage Podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at conferences here sometime soon.
Yeah, I like calling it the conversation by mortgage bankers or CMBs or whatever it is. It's just great discussion. I love the fact that it's unscripted. We know a little bit about what we talk about, but it's whatever you ask, whatever I ask, whatever. One of these we're going to have to do. It's going to be me asking you more questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love it.
But I enjoy it very much. Thank you,
Rick. We'll see you around, Bob, and good luck in your travels here in the upcoming weeks.
Sounds good.